In this video, I'll just go through a single problem, problem number 28 from exercise number 3, section 7.2. 7.2, exercise 3, problem 28, which might be one of the more difficult problems in the entire section, so I think this video will be quite useful. We're after D wedge B. The D's and the B's here appear multiple times, so that information might not be the key to unraveling the problem. It's not abundantly clear how we're going to get the D wedge B, but there is a definite clue here given to us by the conclusion. The main operator in the conclusion is a wedge. Anytime that you're asked to derive a wedge statement, think to yourself, this could be the result of constructive dilemma. Constructive dilemma, you recall, allows us to get out, as the conclusion, a wedge statement. In fact, examining the information that we're given, these three premises, constructive dilemma does seem to be a definite possibility. In premises 1 and 2, we've got two horseshoes joined by a dot, and that's one of the necessary conditions for pulling off constructive dilemma. And in line 3, we've got the antecedent to each of the horseshoe statements in line number 2 joined by a wedge. And that's another necessary condition, the second necessary condition to pull out constructive dilemma. Two horseshoes joined by a dot and the antecedent of each horseshoe joined by a wedge. So right off the bat, we can pull off CD using 2 and 3. So I'll start the problem right there and see what it gets me. 2 and 3 constructive dilemma, and we get the consequent of each horseshoe joined by a wedge. In this case, we would get D wedge C. Not quite what we want D wedge B. So think to yourself, what can I now do with D wedge C? Well, D happens to be the antecedent to the first horseshoe statement in 1, and likewise for C, it's the antecedent to the second horseshoe statement and line number 1. So line number 1, two horseshoes joined by a dot. Line number 4, our newly derived line, the antecedent of each joined by a wedge. Well, we've immediately set up yet another constructive dilemma, this time 1 and 4 CD, and that'll give us the consequent of each horseshoe joined by a wedge. It'll get us B wedge D. B wedge D. So that's pretty darn close to what we want, but again, it's not exactly alike, so we're not done with the problem just yet. What can we do with B wedge D? Well, nothing that seems to be obvious immediately jumps off the page at me, so I've got to take stock, reevaluate where I am in the problem, think through my logically possible moves. There's another rather obvious move, and maybe this is where many of you started the problem, to be made here given our initial three premises. Not only do we have the makings of the constructive dilemmas that we pulled off, but you'll notice here the main operator in 1, also in 2, the main operator there is the dot. And anytime we've got the main operator is the dot, we can, if we need to, simplify. So that seems to be a rather obvious move, one that we've neglected thus far, but a fairly obvious move that we can now make. Simplify 1 and 2 respectively. So 1 sim, no real particular order, followed immediately by 2 simplification. That'll get me 6 and 7 respectively, a little bit more here to work with. So the result of 1 sim, we get D horseshoe B, and the result of 2 sim, we get B horseshoe D, the reverse order of that really. So what can we do with 6, 7, as well as 5? This is kind of the fruit of our labor here, these three premises. And why did we go to the trouble of doing that? How is that going to get us closer to our objective? We want D wedge B, D wedge B. D, you'll notice, is the consequent of a horseshoe statement. B, also the consequent of a horseshoe statement. And we want those two joined by a wedge. Well, as noted earlier, this seems to be the makings of constructive dilemma. What we don't have to pull out constructive dilemma is two horseshoes joined by a dot. However, in 6 and 7 respectively, we do have two horseshoes. We've got two horseshoes, we want two horseshoes joined by a dot, so it seems to be the case that we need to build the necessary requirements to pull off that constructive dilemma. But that's easy enough to do. Again, we've got two horseshoes, we want two horseshoes joined by a dot, so all we need to do is jam 6 and 7 together via conjunction. So that'll be my next move. Not an easy one to spot, but if you take some time to think your way through the steps of the problem, eventually you'll see 6 and 7 conjunction to set up, again, constructive dilemma. So pay particular attention to the order that you put these together. Needs to mirror the exact pattern of the rule constructive dilemma. So we want 7 to come first, B horseshoe D, and second, we want D horseshoe B. So that's 6, 7 conjunction. And now with line number 5, we've used 6 and 7 there. That was our conjunction. Now we've got 5 left over. And 5, B wedge D. B is the antecedent. D is the antecedent of our second horseshoe statement. We've set up 5 and 8 constructive dilemma. And that's the key step to unraveling the problem. Granted, not an easy one to see, but with more practice, you'll be able to pick up on these patterns fairly quickly. 5 and 8, constructive dilemma, and we get then the consequent of each horseshoe statement joined by a wedge. We get, as on line number 9, we get D wedge B. So a fairly tricky problem, several constructive dilemmas. In fact, we ended up with 3 constructive dilemmas. This last one we had to build, essentially, build the necessary requirements out of the scratch parts. But again, constructive dilemma, the key to unraveling problem number 28.